Today we are going to work on hip extension, which is great for everyone to do, especially those that spend a lot of time in hip flexions, so in a seated position, but also especially for runners. We need hip extension on our stance leg as we pull through to avoid overextending or compressing through our low back. So oftentimes, if we're limited in hip extension, we're either going to rotate to compensate or we're going to hyperextend through our low back, which then we lose that rib over pelvis position. So we're going to start with a mobilization, and then we're going to work on some end range control and then integrate that into a dynamic movement. So we're going to start in a half kneeling position. So feel free to use a pad or a pillow or a folded towel to support your knee. And we're going to be in a 90-degree angle in our front leg and 90-degree angle in our back leg. From here, most people think to stretch their hip flexors they have to really lunge, arch forward, but really all it is that pelvis tucking under. So you want to think about that belt buckle to the rib cage, and now we're actually going to over-exaggerate that a little bit until we feel a nice stretch in the front of the hip. And again, we're working a little bit more on joint versus getting kind of a static muscle stretch. So you're going to feel that in the front of the hip, tuck that pelvis under, belt buckle to the rib cage, and you can even bring your ribs down a little bit to intensify that stretch. And then from here, we're just going to oscillate a little bit. So we're just going to kind of wiggle the joint to try and get a little bit of movement and space. So you're just going to rock back and forth, no more than 10 degrees. And we're going to squeeze the bum a little bit to make sure we maintain that tuck under. And again, just rocking back and forth, just gently. We're going to spend a minute on each side, maintaining that rib position. So we're actually moving forward and back versus arching. And then let's go over to the other side. So same thing, finding that 90-degree position, both sides, tucking that pelvis under. So I feel that in the front of my hip here, keeping my ribs and pelvis stacked. Belt buckle to the rib cage, nice bum squeeze, and then we're just oscillating back and forth a little bit. Just jiggling the joint. Getting a little bit of movement there that we're then going to reinforce with some strengthening. So I love doing this one before I do any hip work to just kind of get that joint moving, but it's also a great one to do after you've been sitting for a long period. So if you're on the road for a race, taking breaks throughout the trip to just get some hip extension going. Or if you spend a lot of time at a desk throughout the day, taking some movement breaks and incorporating this one in. So now we're going to integrate into hip extension. You're going to take a rolled up washcloth or towel or even a ball of socks, and you're going to lie on your stomach. And if you struggle with extension, so if you're on your stomach and you tend to want to arch, you can use a rolled up towel or a pillow under your hips, and that's going to put you into a little bit more hip flexion. So we're working on relative hip extension if we don't quite have full hip extension at this time. So you're going to take the towel, you're going to place it behind your knee to just kind of lock out the knee joint, so we isolate this movement from the hips. So you're going to squeeze that towel and you're going to bring your foot up towards your shin to lock out the ankle as well. Again, maybe we have our pillow or our bolster under our hips, and we're going to tuck that pelvis under, so rib cage towards the pelvis, or pelvis towards the rib cage. And then from here, we're going to squeeze our bum, squeeze the towel, and then drive that heel up towards the ceiling, trying to lift our thigh off the ground. You may not get anywhere, and that's okay. We're working on engagement and intent here. What I want to make sure you're maintaining that canister position and not just arching through your low back. So we're staying nice and long through the spine, squeezing that towel, driving that heel up, and maybe getting enough range that you could slide a piece of paper under your thigh, but it's more about the engagement and intent than the movement. So you'll hold for about 10 seconds, work on 3 to 5 reps each side. So I'm squeezing the towel first, driving my toes towards my shin, squeezing my bum, and then driving my heel up without losing my canister position. So belt buckle towards the rib cage. Maybe I even press my right leg into the ground as a bit of a counter balance. Good. All right, switch sides. So same thing on the other side. I'm gonna pay a little bit more attention to the pelvis here. So you can place your fingertips underneath your pelvis, that bony part on the front of your hips. And I want you to press equally into both hands. So I'm squeezing the towel, driving my toes towards my shins, squeezing my bum, then driving that heel up towards the ceiling. And I want you to keep equal pressure into both hands. So if you feel one pelvic bone push into your hand more than the other, then it means you're twisting. So we want to maintain equal pressure into both hands as we drive up. And then control down. Let's do one more together. On your own, you can do 3 to 5 reps. So we're squeezing the towel, driving those toes towards the shin, lock out the knee, lock out the ankle. All that movement comes through the hips. Squeeze the bum, drive the heel up, hold for 10 seconds. Make sure you maintain your breathing. And the harder you squeeze, the more intense this will be. So if you're doing this as a warm-up, maybe you want to go to about 50% tension. If you're doing this as a separate mobility drill, maybe you increase that intensity a little bit more. And control down. Great. So now we're going to integrate this into a glute bridge and working on integrating that hip extension in a dynamic movement. So you're going to lie on your back. Your heels are going to walk up towards your butt as far as they can. Doing this with bare feet so you can get your toes nice and spread. And finding equal pressure on the base of the little toe, big toe, and heel. So we got our whole foot on the ground. And then from here, we're finding our canister position. Ribs stacked over the pelvis, nice long neck, a little bit of a chin towards the throat. Then I'm going to squeeze my glutes, drive my feet into the ground to lift my hips up towards the ceiling. Okay, let's just do a couple of those. Maintaining that canister position throughout, so all that movement comes through the hips. And then we're going to go into a glute bridge march, so working on some more lateral stability. So at the top, you're going to press through your left foot so much that you can drive your right knee up towards your chest without letting your hips sag. So we're squeezing that bum. Then we're going to bring that right foot down and switch over to the left side. So we're working on that knee drive on one side, hip extension on the other. If my elbows are on the ground, it's going to create a little bit more stability. So if this is too easy for you and you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, you can go arms across your chest. Or even outstretch your arms overhead. Key here is to maintain hip extension. So if you feel yourself cranking through your low back, just back off a little bit. or reset. So come all the way down, find your positioning, squeeze that bum, and then reset. So you can either stay up if you're able to maintain that hip extension as you march, or after each march, you can lower your hips down, reset, and come back up. So this is a great sequence to do before you run to get that hip extension, reinforce that glute activation through your stance leg to minimize the extra compression through your low back.